field, of that unearthly state where pain dissolves away, dropped from the shuddering blinds, he blundered from the roadbed, staggering toward the smell of corn, before the husks whispering. In the sudden gust below the trestle, the withered, nervous man collided with the fence, and the shock bobbed his head in an arc over the wire, and he lost his spectacles, and his body rebounded, and he reached out slowly. His hand closed fast and opened, and he bowed over the field. His locomotive crept up the hillside, then dry stalks whispered thinly. He stood upright and bowed, held by the trembling wire he could not see. He let it go and stood in the colorless twilight. His knees gave way. He lowered his body and knelt. One iron furrow sanded his fingertips. He felt into the crevices. The light darkened. He withdrew his hands and sent them forward, searching, furtive. The ground felt unearthly, like metal. Snow filled the cracks. His sleeve caught on a barb. The wire lashed him. He tore himself free, hand over hand, clawing from wire to wire. He struggled to stand. He saw nothing. Gray air, odorless, crossed the field, filled his nostrils. A sharp point struck and stabbed. He flexed his fingers, closed them. The wire quivered. He clutched it with all his strength, and the fence post shook. He brought his hand to his mouth. He placed it on the wire. He heard the distant sound of friction. He ran his palm on the wire. The wind rose, stalks rasped. A parched tip tickled his eyelids, teasing them like a feather. A shadow flapped on his forehead. The light again darkened. He wondered if it were the night he saw, approaching. The wind calmed and he was moving, guiding on the wire. The gray air rose depthless between his feet, before his face. He lifted one arm for balance and found a post. Then he lifted the other hand, perilously. Stumbling, he lost balance. His fingers slid to a barb. The taut wire shook him and swayed low. He held himself close to the earth, soothing the wire, outstretched, motionless. He lunged for the post and fell, was lashed and trembled, hoisted himself and swayed in the calm. He extended his arms and crept on the tips of his toes. His fingers fled from the barbs and, quailing, caressed them. He could not cease moving, for the wire would not cease moving. He remembered the coldness of earth and the crevices of earth. The wire throbbed over the earth steadily. Rushing noise came from his body. Mucus foamed to his lips. He could not spit it from his teeth. His mouth would not open. His tongue stuck to his lips. He lifted his palm to his mouth and sucked his wrists. He tore his mouth open, cried out retched and spat. Tall, he lowered his head and lifted his other hand until his arms stretched wide above the field. After a long while, the fence did not end, and the man stepped past one post after another. When he stumbled, he no longer fell. The barbs became less jagged. The wire shook him, and they fought each other. The intervals between the posts lengthened, and he heard his train passing over hills. The sound became a humming noise within him, from which he always receded. In the air there was a rustling of dry husks, and a sudden cry snatched close from mountain walls, the wail of a child or an animal. The train climbed and passed away from him, and he heard himself hear nothing. Dust and mortal, cursed my father. He heard nothing, and distances drew close about the wire. Dark vistas, once before him, gathered behind him in the space of the field, far from him, within him. Why he came he did not remember, or what he had lost, or where he had begun, or to hope for its end, or to pause, or to fear. But the wire had become familiar. It supported him and led him, and its pain gave him forgetfulness. His other hand, wrenched free, stabbed for a post, and he sank through an emptiness. He was aware of nightfall and acknowledged his fear. He remembered without protest that he had moved for a long while and could not stop himself, even from falling. He rose again slowly. The wire had turned. He followed. He toiled a level ground. He bent his head on a hillside. Again and again he turned in the hollows of his memory. The cavities in his knees spread into his belly, his chest, his throat. He felt himself floating with the paralyzed, inert movement of a dream. When he tried to recover, he lost himself in his blindness, in the darkness, in the field. But the wire held him. The punctuated strands smoothed down his hands, and the wire became smooth. Dust and mortal, cursed my father. The wire held him upright and kept him moving, for he could not move alone. Dust and mortal, cursed my father. The wire became his direction, for alone he was lost. Dust and mortal, cursed my father. He and the wire were one thing, for together they consumed him. Wrapped in a flowing fever, he forgot his hunger and coldness, the wind and the sounds of the night, the darkness around him, and the fear of falling. He remembered the wire, and possessing no other memory, he felt that he had known it forever.